What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Technician Podcast. I've got a special guest who's flown up to sunny coast today. Nerida, how are you today?
I'm really well. Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome. Well, thank you for coming to the house. Like, I've literally just met you technically online, a few days ago?
Yes.
And I like this, though, the flow, the ability to do so. And what we were just speaking about before, you allowing yourself to give back and give your information is really kind of you, first of all. But how does it feel being able to do this now, considering where you've come from?
It feels amazing. It was always the vision. Like I was telling you, I come from a really poor background. I come from low socioeconomic family, grew up like with a fair amount of trauma and really struggled for such a long time. It's been through my own journey of overcoming my own depression, my own sort of disconnect from self, that I'm in this position now where, not only do I feel so good in myself, but I'm able to teach others. And not only that, I can actually offer so much of that for free. So it's an honor to be able to do that. And I believe that, together we create such a ripple effect. If even just one person listens to this episode and they take away more compassion, more understanding of others, and that ripples on into their community, then that's creating peace on earth, isn't it?
I love that. Yeah. And it's like that. Like you said, the ripple effect aspect happens really quickly sometimes too.
Yeah.
And all it takes is a story. I know reading your story, there was a one comment that really hit me. Now, there's obviously a fair bit I want to cover with you. But the one thing I feel is really going to hit people and lock them in for this episode was the comment that this coach said to you, which was, "Oh, darling, CrossFit is not for you."
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, what the fuck? Where was this and what happened? Like, how was your response to that?
I immediately went into shame, immediately went into feeling really humiliated. So like bit of backstory, I was always really fit growing up. I did surf lifesaving, and that was where my family sort of, that was our sport that we all did together. And I was always really fit, met my first boyfriend, travelled overseas, and we did the whole UK holiday Europe thing. And there's a sort of like saying, when you go over there, you get a shot of the Heathrow injection. Like you get and it's like you put on 10 kilos. Well, I think I had 2 of them.
Gotcha.
So came home quite overweight, like just lived the party life. And my partner and I bought a house across the road from a CrossFit gym. And this was 2009, so way before CrossFit was well known. And I remember watching, like I'd always known I had to do something to get this weight off, but I couldn't really figure out what it was. And then I remember seeing this gym and watching women like lifting tires, lifting barbells, doing pull-ups, running, skipping, rowing. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, like that, I want to do that. And the funny thing is, most people are quite naive to go into a gym for the first time. I wasn't. Nervous. Most people are quite nervous. I wasn't. I was completely naive. I just walked straight in thinking, sign me up, take my money. This, whatever this is, I want to be a part of it. And as I walked into the gym and I was looking around for somebody to talk to, the owner slowly started making his way towards me, and I could see in his body language, like he was sort of laying back and he was looking me up and down, very skeptical. And so I started asking questions, and I just remember him not saying a word. And then finally he said, "Darling, this is not for you." And it was one of those moments where I literally thought I just wanted the floor to open up and swallow me. Like walking back out of that gym, I had tears in my eyes. I felt humiliated. I felt so awful. And then, for the next 6 months, I would just watch them outside my window and just really wish I could be a part of it. Like I was so, like I felt, I literally used to watch them. I used to watch them laughing and having fun and high-fiving each other. And just so happened 6 months later, I was at a barbecue with a friend, and he'd lost a fair bit of weight, looked really good. And he was just glowing, like he just looked healthy. And I said to him, "What have you been doing?" And he said, "I've been doing CrossFit." And I was like, damn it. Like, and he was like, "No, come with me, come to the gym that I go to." And I instantly had this anxiety. Anyway, we made an agreement. I did go, and I was terrified, but I was met with a complete opposite experience. So the owner welcomed me in, introduced me to people, did our first workout. It was something crazy, like 5 rounds of 400-meter run and 20 box jumps, 20 burpees. It was hectic.
They're intense. Like the CrossFit stuff is wild.
But I'll never forget, like I was way behind anyone else, way behind. And my last round of burpees, like everyone was finished, and all of a sudden everyone just starts dropping down and doing extra burpees, doing my last 20 with me. Like everyone knows this is the CrossFit way, right? And I just remember thinking, what is this? And then we finished, everyone was high-fiving me. One lady hugged me and I was hooked. And, you know, I joined up to that gym and he said to me, Nerida, what do you want to achieve? And I was in tears when I said, I really want to lose 20 kilos. And he said to me, great, come here 5-6 days a week, look at your nutrition, get a coach, and we'll help you get there. And I literally signed up to Michelle Bridges' 12-week body transformation that was starting the following week. I went religiously 5-6 days a week. Within 12 weeks, I'd lost 21 kilos.
Yeah, congrats.
But it wasn't even about the weight. It was like I was strong, I was fit, I was healthy. I could do things I never thought I'd be able to do. I was confident. And it was funny because so many people look at that moment where I was, you know, rejected from that first gym as, you know, really terrible, but it was actually a gift. Because I would never, had I not seen that contrast, I would never have gone on to create, you know, what was at the time one of Australia's biggest women's only CrossFit gyms that was all about inclusivity and belonging and being welcomed.
Yeah, wow. It's almost like that horrible moment for you, which could have been classed as traumatic essentially because of the feelings that brought up within you, kicked you up the arse to go and do what you truly were meant to be doing, right?
100%.
At the time.
100%. And I was there for, you know, I ran that business for nearly 10 years and it was like one of the best things I ever did. Like it was just such a, you know, it was the thing that brought me self-worth, self-confidence, you know. So
leadership abilities.
Yeah. And I now know that guy and I know, you know, that was his own stuff, right? Like he was a bit of an elitist. He struggled in the industry. He never received the success that I did or the sort of like reputation or the respect from the community. And that's okay. Like I held no ill feeling towards him, you know, but it's just, I'm so glad I did experience that because it showed, and then the opposite, that guy that did give me a chance, because ultimately that, you know, that owner that did give me a chance and make me feel welcomed, he changed my life because I lost the weight. I left the relationship I was actually miserable in. 6 months later, I left the job I was miserable in. I started my own business, you know, and I started hanging out with people. You know, the beginning of CrossFit for me was the first time I was spending time with people who weren't drinking and doing drugs and just partying and were actually like reading books, going to seminars, like healing, you know, and living a really healthy lifestyle. So, yeah.
That right there is something I'd really love to pull apart for someone because if we put that together as this little cauldron of like create your new life, what was it that it installed in you that you were able to then go and leave the job, leave the relationship you weren't happy in? What were some of the core feelings that you built up or beliefs that allowed you to continue and do that and create that life?
Worthiness, 100% worthiness. And, you know, like it's so important that what you do, like who you spend your time with, what you do physically, what you do emotionally, that you start looking at how can I build up worthiness within myself, like self-esteem, so that I feel good inside. Most people, I would argue today, don't feel good enough. And that's what I had struggled with my entire life. And what was so beautiful about these people in this CrossFit community was there was just this pure acceptance. I was accepted when I was, you know, 95 kilos and I couldn't even I couldn't even do a burpee. And I was accepted. And there was no difference to the way I was treated when I went and did my first CrossFit competition and came first. I was just a part of the community and everyone was welcomed and everyone was made to feel like they belonged and that they were seen and celebrated no matter where they were at.
So it almost sounds like probably one of the biggest things that are happening right now is this disconnection. There's no acceptance for a lot of people. So if you don't feel like you're a part of something, then your worthiness is quite low.
We definitely need connection as human beings to thrive. We need connection and we need safety. If we're not connected to people, a purpose, you know, our source, whatever that looks like. I believe in God. Maybe, you know, others might not, but they might believe in the universe, whatever you call it. We all need a connection to something to thrive, because if we don't have that, when times get tough, what do we hold on to? Who do we lean on? So I do believe that with the rise of social media and technology, the more time we're spending on it means we're spending less time with people and doing those things in connection, which is really harmful to our health.
I see run clubs have become quite big now, and it's like that connection, it's fitness, it's health.
Yes.
And like you said, I feel like because people are working on themselves, and a lot of those people are normally reading books, doing things, learning about the unconscious mind, they seem to have more of an acceptance of other people, right? So what is that difference between like someone that looks after themselves physically and then someone that doesn't? Like what is it that's projected onto other people?
So Okay, so inherently the way you treat yourself shows how much, like, shows me how much you value yourself. So people that struggle to show up for themselves deep down suffer from a deep wound around not feeling worthy of it. And I see this a lot. I see people show up for other people but not themselves. That's because they their sense of self comes from external rather than internal. So I really believe that, like, when you first start doing a lot of this work, this self-development, what happens is, essentially what any of us are doing, right, we're enacting the role of a parent with a client that client may not have had. And so a lot of the work that I do is around helping people to draw the connection between their childhood experience, their first 7 years, their emotional home, to why they're struggling in life right now. So that your emotional home are the emotions that you felt most, your 3 to 5 emotions that you felt most between 0 and 7. So when we look at the emotion wheel, we have primary emotions, which are in the middle, and then we have secondary. So we have sort of like 5 primary emotions. We have love, joy, and then we have fear, sadness, and anger. Now, whenever we're stuck, it's one of those 3, right? Fear, sadness, or anger. So off the top of fear, we have anxiety, nervousness, inadequacy, insecurity, inferiority. Okay? Off the back of sadness, we have things like loneliness, rejection, shame, depression. Off the back of anger, we have resentment, irritation, annoyance, frustration, agitation. And most people will identify with the secondary emotions more so. Most people don't feel comfortable. Like, I hear a lot of women saying, I've got anxiety. Well, actually, you experience a lot of fear. But they don't like to say, I feel fear. It's anxiety or depression feels more comfortable. Now, the work that I've done is I can tell you these 3 things. If you identify with the more fear-based emotional home, you experienced a lot of chaos and instability as a child. If you experienced the sadness, then you didn't get enough connection, and you experienced a lot of isolation and neglect. If you resonate more with the anger, a lot of boundaries were crossed and needs not met. Doesn't that make sense then, right?
Big time. And would you say that it doesn't matter whether it was the mother or the father more so with those sort of feelings? Or because from what I've seen, it shows up differently whether it is the father wound or the mother wound. What's the more common one you see, the mother wound or the father wound?
Ooh, that's a good question. It does matter because the way it plays out is very different, right? So the way a mother wound plays out for a woman is she shows up being hyper-perfectionist, people-pleasing, needs to look a certain way, puts on this front, right? Is hyper-focused on the way she looks, the way that other people perceive her, and being a perfectionist or a high achiever. That's typically a mother wound playing out with a woman. A mother wound playing out with a man is he will seek external validation and attention from women. So that's when you often see men acting like, cheating in affairs, like hyper, like unable to be faithful to a woman, is because they're constantly seeking that love and connection that they didn't get from a mother. A father wound for a woman will play out like I have a father wound whereby my father was quite distant emotionally. So I tend to, when I'm dating, I can be very attracted to men who are naturally more emotionally distant and emotionally, cut off from me. But then I'll pull at that and want them to be more connected even though they just don't have the ability to. Whereas a father wound for a man plays out in he doesn't feel good enough. His father never made him feel good enough. So therefore he's constantly searching to prove himself right. So that'll show up in like overworking, chasing financial success. It'll be constantly striving to be seen a certain way in society, and he's really searching for dad's love.
I find them a lot of, as we said before, it's like anger based.
Oh yeah,
very
totally.
anger based, like very 100%. Reactive, very trigger happy.
Yeah, yep.
And I guess knowing all that, like you were very self aware just then and saying that like, I'm aware that is what plays out.
Yeah, yeah.
How have you sort of lowered it though? Because I'm assuming it's better now that you've done all this work.
Oh my God, so much better.
What did you do to really help calm that down a little bit?
So nothing will trigger us more than our intimate relationships will. So, it's interesting. I have this sort of wound around rejection. So what I notice is, I have a tendency, even though my long-term goal is to get married and have children, like I've always wanted that. It's definitely something that I would love to do in my life. I notice myself, in order to avoid rejection, I notice myself not putting myself out there, because the pain of that can be quite, wounding, because it goes back to that original pain. So I have to work really hard to sort of put myself out there. But then when I do, I notice myself, lots of stuff will come up, in relationships. So there's a couple of things that I really look at when I'm dating. So anytime something comes up for me, like in the body, this is where we feel it most, right? So we feel the feeling in the body, and then we go to our mind. And we do one of four things when we feel an overwhelming feeling through the body that feels, quite overbearing for us, because it reminds us of childhood pain. It's that same childhood pain. We will have a reaction, right? And we will go into one of four ways to alleviate that. We will either project it out onto somebody else. We will either dismiss, minimize, or deflect. So I'm a projector. So if you were my partner, if something happened, right, if I noticed you were being distant and maybe a little bit like I wasn't feeling connected to you and I wanted connection, my go-to, and I have to work really hard at this, say for instance, I come home, you're on your phone, and if I'm feeling lonely, disconnected, neglect, this is a big one that plays out a lot, right? If I'm not practicing the pause, and I come home and I notice you on your phone, and I feel that rush through my body, right? Oh, he's on his phone again. He doesn't even love me. He's not he doesn't know how to take care of me. He doesn't even care about me, blah, blah, blah. Now, what I try to do is whenever I notice something happening in my body, I just try and pause and I breathe. And I'm just like, okay, I can feel this in my body, and I'm just like slowing down. And I straight away ask myself, what am I feeling right now? And I'm like, I'm noticing I'm feeling lonely. I'm feeling sadness. I'm feeling rejection. I'm feeling confusion. Okay, that makes sense. They remind me of my core emotional wounds from childhood. What is it that I want to feel? I want to feel connected. I want to feel loved. I want to feel safe. And I want to feel seen. So what I have to do then is I have to practice communicating, because intimacy, you probably know this, is into me you see. So that's where I have to practice, instead of spewing at you like, you're on your phone, you don't even want to connect, you don't even want to spend time with me, you don't really love me anymore, do you? Because that's just actually creating more of the thing I don't want. I have to pause, and I have to practice vulnerability, and I have to share with you and say, hey, I can see you're on your phone right now. I'm noticing I'm feeling really lonely and distant from you. When you've got time, I'd love to connect with you and spend time together. And that takes a lot of work, right? And I don't always get that right, I don't always get that right. So, but the more we practice that, but it means being willing to tolerate that emotion first. It means being willing and able to let yourself feel it in your body before you go on. Because projection essentially is, I feel something, and because it feels so intolerable, I just want to spew it onto you. So then I feel a little bit better for a little while, but then that creates a chasm between us. And then that means I feel then shame because I've now made you feel bad.
Yeah, wow. So well said. Thank you for that.
Such a cycle.
And it's this cycle also that projecting onto your partner who doesn't know how to deal with that, then goes into shutdown mode, and then probably goes to alcohol or drugs or something. It's like, what the fuck did I do? She doesn't tell me anything.
Yeah.
Because most men aren't emotionally intelligent. Mm-hmm. Now, I know that's a big paintbrush to use right there, because I know a lot of men are doing the work, and it's beautiful. But from my experience of doing a lot of men's work, there's a lot of men not doing the work, Nerida, and it's hard because it sucks, because I see so many men hurting. Yeah. And even if they just heard that, it might make them go, oh, it's not my fault most of the time.
Well, I'll say this, right? This is the funny thing about relationship. I want you to think about a yin-yang symbol, okay? So the black is the masculine, and he's got a little white dot. The feminine is the white, and she's got a little black dot. Now, when a masculine and feminine come together, that little black dot and that white dot is our childhood pain.
Ooh, I like that. I haven't heard that before.
That's all of our fear, our sadness, and our anger. Yep. It's all of the wounds, the mother wounds, the father wounds, the stories, the fears, the little parts of us that feel unlovable and are afraid, if that person saw all those parts of me, would they still love me? And what happens is when we fall in love, did you know that the same chemicals are fired in us as when we were nursed by our mother as a baby? When our mother picked us up, looked down at us and kissed us and loved us, those endorphins that pump through our body are the exact same endorphins that pump through our body when our lover is kissing and touching us. What? It's the same chemical reaction. That's why it's so intoxicating.
That makes sense too.
Yeah. It's like, I'm safe, I'm loved, I'm connected, I'm with somebody who loves me, okay? So what happens is we have a lot of that in childhood, maybe, hopefully. And then as we, get into older years, we have less and less than that. And then that's where our pain comes up and we go searching for that feeling again. So that's why we fall in love, because we think our partner is going to take away all of that pain. But actually what happens is the people that we meet, that we naturally fall in love with, tend to feel familiar because they remind us of our family of origin. So like, I don't know what your wounding is, but my wounding is that male that's slightly emotionally distant. So I will, it's so interesting, right? I went to a wedding with a friend of mine. So I've got this one male friend that I've been friends with for like 10 years. And, he was always really into me. He would ask me out and I'd be like, no way, not interested. It was always well known within our friendship circle that he adored me. And I went to his wedding like 12 months ago and it really hit me. I looked at him in such a different way and I was like, wow, this guy is good looking. He is intelligent. He's wealthy. He's successful. And he's married the most stunning woman, right? She's just stunning. And I remember thinking to myself, like, here I am single, thinking, why did I not see this 10 years ago? Now, the funny thing is 10 years ago, he was a healthy, secure person. And because I felt so unworthy, when he came in, because we don't attract what we want, we attract what we are. So when he came in, he was so worthy and so available for love that it terrified me. But instead of me, because it's really hard for us to see ourselves, right? Instead of me looking at myself and going, wow, I actually feel really unworthy of this. And there's a part of him treating me this way that gives me the ick, that makes me feel repulsed.
He's such a nice guy.
Yeah. And the reason why women say that is because they're used to love that doesn't feel healthy. So my blueprint for love was distance, like my father, right? My father really never told me he loved me, never showed that he loved me. If anything, he more showed me that he was disgusted in me than anything. Like he was, telling me you're the black sheep of the family. Like he would say horrible things to me. So because this guy came in that was so healthy and loving, that actually brought up disgust in me. But I couldn't own that. I projected that back on him and I was like, there's something wrong with him. This is what most people do, right? So I pushed him away and then now 10 years later I've done all this work and I see him in a totally different light and I'm like, wow, that's so interesting. So we do this, right? We attract someone who's a perfect fit for our wound. That reminds us that you will attract someone that energetically reminds you of a parent that you craved love from the most.
Yeah, I see it a lot where it's like you attract your pattern.
100% every time. And then what we do is we seek to change them because we want the wound to be changed so that it means we can close that loop and it means we're worthy. But then, and this is where we get the power struggle, right? But really, it's you that has to change.
Yeah, wow. And I'd love to go in on that because this is such an interesting topic for me because what I'm seeing is that what I'm mostly helping with these business people is relationships.
Always. Because people come to me all the time. They're like, can you help me with my business? I'm like, yeah, sure. And then we sit down 10 minutes in there talking about their relationships. Relationships are the source of all pain and joy and love in our life. So if they're not working, nothing else will. And typically, emotional intelligence, the reason why I love this topic so much is because the more emotionally intelligent you are, the healthier your relationships are. And guess what? The more successful you naturally are because guess what? To be successful, you need to be able to have good relationships. Whether you're with your staff, clients, whatever that looks like, it's all a people game. So if you don't have that, you'll struggle to be successful.
Oh, I couldn't echo that enough because from what I've seen in my personal experience, it's like I've experienced a lot of rejection in my life. A little bit of abandonment.
Yep.
I've got beautiful parents and I've had a beautiful childhood, but obviously there's always trauma, right?
Of course.
It doesn't have to be I think a lot of people think it's like you were molested and all these other things. It's like maybe dad wasn't home because he was working all the time.
Well, what's really funny is there are sort of 3 wounds that most of us end up with. And I'll put these in order of what are most popular. So the unworthy wound, number 1. Then there's the unknown wound, and then the unloved wound.
Unknown,
which is like it's usually from a parent that was overly intrusive, overly overbearing, enmeshment, codependent, that just constantly stepped over your boundaries, was quite controlling.
Made you the best friend sort of thing.
Yeah, that didn't know how to like actually know you on a deeper level and what you need. So unworthy, unknown, unloved. Now, what is interesting is I actually think that the unloved wound is almost more obvious because it's normally linked to bigger trauma. So domestic, like violence, abuse, tragedy, poverty. It's typically easier to recognize. So I'm starting to see more people with that unloved wound are getting help quicker because it's sort of more obvious. Whereas I think people with the unworthy and the unknown wound, they may have had parents that were good parents. We want to do that whole label, good and bad, right and wrong, black and white, when essentially you might have had parents that showed up for you, that paid for you to do sport, came and watched you at school, but maybe deeply still didn't really know how to connect with you and didn't know how to support your emotional needs and still maybe were afraid of some of your big emotions. And what happens is as we're growing up, we have two systems within us. We have an attachment system and we have a defense system. Now, our attachment system is where we seek love, and our defense system is where we say no, we set boundaries and we express our anger. Now, we're always seeking attachment, right? So if we go to use our defense system and attachment is taken away, we will learn to shut that defense system down. So if we go to express anger and mum leaves the room and tells us we're bad, or dad points at us and tells us, don't do that, stop crying, calm down, like da-da-da, that's a little part of us that we learn, when I do this, I'm not loved. So I'm going to quickly learn to shut that off. And so that keeps playing out in adulthood, right? And then you're on this huge, so you're sort of like, you're repeating that pattern with your partner.
Can you see how could you give us an example potentially? I know this is probably a tough question, but what you just said, how that plays out in the workplace? Like I'm sure you've worked with employees and employers where it's like that they'll think, because most people pedestal someone, right?
Yeah.
I know for me, I was stuck in a loop of getting validation from my perceived kings. Mm-hmm. So any men that I looked up to, saw as my leader, as daddy, I would need them to say I'm doing well for me to actually feel like I'm doing well. So any time that I was around managers, football coaches, things like that, I was like a different person. It was like I couldn't fucking talk anymore. Whereas when I'm around anyone else, it was fine. So do you see a lot of that play out? Like you just said, all those wounds, how do they then practically play out in the workplace for someone to go right now listening, oh shit, that's what I do at work?
Yeah. So, okay, this is the kicker, right? So when you go back to childhood, we all have different, there would have been little sparks of connection where you would have noticed, because the way that we develop our self-worth is through two people, mum and dad. And it's through their time, their presence, their joy, their laughter, their eye contact, all of those things. The way that we develop our children's sense of self is through mirroring them, being there, being present, loving them, laughing, being in joy when we're with them. And the funny thing is that doesn't happen anywhere near as much as it should for a number of reasons, right? Parents are stressed, they're in survival mode, they're working,
got their own
burnt out, they've got their own trauma, 100%. So when we're in childhood, now, when we see people who have a really, really amazing sense of humor, right? They're very, very funny. That may have developed in childhood. They may have been, not really felt the presence of a parent until they made them laugh, and then all of a sudden they get connection. So ding, ding, ding. Oh, when I make them laugh, I get love. So I'm just going to keep doing that. Or it might have been little Susie, just, went to school and achieved at school, got a report card, came home, and all of a sudden mum and dad are like, oh my God, well done, you did so well. Ding, ding, ding. Well, when I perform, I get love and attention. There are all these ways, right, that we've learnt in childhood when we get love, and we will keep playing that out in adulthood. So what you're doing is you're talking about that constant need for validation externally because you have none of it internally. But let me ask you, even when you'd get that validation, how long would it sit with you before it would disappear again and you'd go back to feeling worthless again?
It used to happen pretty quickly. Now that I've done a fair bit of work on it, it's like I get my own validation for myself.
Exactly.
But I'll be the test dummy here for anyone listening. What would happen, and obviously Dad and I are amazing now, but when I was younger, my story was I started playing football at 5 years old.
Yeah.
And I was a giant. I was this size by the time I was 6.
Yeah.
So it was like, you're seeing your kid, you're like, this is my cash, money, superstar, let's go get it, you know. And he wanted me to do well. Clearly, he loved me.
Of course.
But I know that my relationship was very much based off how well I was playing.
Exactly, because what would have happened is you would have not felt much love and connection and presence from him until you were playing on the football field, and then all of a sudden you saw it. Yeah. So you were driving constantly to get that love and connection as a kid. The only way that you knew how.
And I'm still hard on myself if I'm not working.
Of course.
Now being an entrepreneur.
Because you've tied your worth, your sense of self to what you achieve and produce.
Yeah.
And so what happens is when we don't develop in childhood in that way, we then repeat that cycle over and over and over into adulthood until it becomes exhausting, and it's like nothing's ever good enough. Like I see it all the time. I see people stop and sort of say, wow, I've made the money, I've done the success, I've bought the house, I've bought the cars, I've had the kids, I've gotten married, I'm doing all the things and I still feel miserable. And it's because you haven't healed your childhood, your emotional home.
Most people don't want to go back there either.
Yeah, I think it is. It's hard work because it's like, going back and looking at that is painful. It's going back and sitting with those memories over and over again and giving yourself the love that you needed that you may not have gotten is painful. And what we do is, there's a great quote, we seek too often for someone else to bring us what we're unwilling to bring ourselves. So that's what we do, right? We either look for validation, we look for love, we look for understanding, we look for, whatever it is, acceptance. And we're constantly looking for other people to give us when actually the work is you giving it to yourself. The only thing to change is self.
That's big. And I guess the question then would be like, what finally made you comfortable enough to go and face all those things to now be where you're at now?
It's pain. There's I have to say, honestly, there's a great quote by Tony Robbins. We do the work for one of two reasons. We either learn enough that we want to, or we go through enough pain that we have to. I remember I struggled, I was diagnosed with depression at 22. I started a business, a very successful business at the age of 30. I remember standing on the top of a cliff, at 35 years old, looking out, thinking to myself, what is wrong with me? I have a partner who loves me. I have 2 thriving businesses, women that love me. I've got so many friends, my family, I'm healthy, I'm young. There is so much that I could be grateful for. Why am I so miserable? And it was because I had, now it makes so much sense. Now that I understand parenting and self-worth and where that connection is, when I go back and I think about all the times that I went to get connection from a parent and I was pushed away or shut down. When I look at times where I was punished and I was shamed. When I look at times where I was, bullied, when I look at times when I was disciplined, it makes so much sense. When I look at how I can remember those things so easily, but I can barely ever remember my parents telling me that they loved me or cuddling me, playing with me, spending time with me. It makes so much sense that I feel so broken as an adult. And so that is the thing, right? And the funny thing is, I now know my parents and I know that, they both love me. I know that they were in survival mode. My dad had a really traumatic childhood, and because that was not healed, he projected a lot of that onto me. And so it's a really challenging thing for me to even talk about it, because it's I don't want to throw him under the bus and blame him, because I know he loves me and I know he did his best, but also I recognize that it wasn't enough, and that's why it led to my sense of self. So for me, it was 4 years ago. And the funny thing is, throughout those years, I'd see psychologists, therapists, counselors, life coaches, Reiki, kinesiologists. I went looking for answers from anyone I could. And it was really funny. It was the beginning of 2020. We went into lockdown. My 2 businesses were closed overnight. My relationship broke down. I was living in an Airbnb in lockdown with no one to talk to, nothing to do. And I remember just saying to myself, why is it that my relationships keep not working? There's one common denominator, and that is me. I need to figure this out for myself. And it was really the first time I really, really took radical responsibility. I just decided everything that's happening in my life is happening because of me. And if that means, it's not good, it means it can be better if I change. And so it was really pain and just deciding to take responsibility instead of pointing and saying he was this and he was that and she was this and she was that. Ask myself, well, what am I actually doing to contribute to that dynamic? And it was mind-blowing to see, the ways that, I remember my ex at the time saying to me, Nerida, I just feel like I'm not good enough for you. And I thought he meant he felt like I was too good for him. very different, right? And I remember being so confused by that, thinking, well, if I'm such an amazing woman, why do you not want to be with me? I didn't get it. And, he wasn't a great communicator. So it was, I didn't really understand what was playing out in the dynamic. But 6 months later, like a fair amount of healing, and I was at a barbecue with some friends, and this couple that I know really well, they got married, and he'd been a bit of a player for a long time. I just became fascinated with trying to understand relationships. And I asked him, I said, Damo, what is it about Soph that made you finally decide to be with her? And he said to me, Nez, he said, she was the only woman that I knew was too good for me that never made me feel that way. And I was like, oh my God. And then all of a sudden, everything just came flooding back. All the moments where I'd criticized my partner, tried to control him, judged him, blamed him, nitpicked, nagged, and it just all came flooding back. And then I really started to go down the whole rabbit hole of like masculine, feminine dynamics, and I could and childhood wounding, right? I could really, really see that we were both playing out our childhood wounds. I was attracted to him because he was emotionally distant, but still he was a good man, but just, kept me at arm's length. And he was attracted to me because his parents, his mother was hypercritical, hyper controlling, hyper judgmental of her husband. And it was a perfect fit. And so, and this is the thing, right? What happened was we fell in love. We stayed together for maybe 18 months to 2 years when everything was good. And then all of a sudden that wears off, right? The honeymoon period wears off. And then there's that old quote, everywhere you go, there you are. I remember going to the toilet one night in the middle of the night and just being hit with this sense of like, I feel really miserable. And immediately I went to, here's the problem. And then it was funny because I instantly blamed him, which we all do this, right? But years later, I realized, wow, I have always felt this way. I've always felt a bit broken, a bit sad, a bit down, a bit unworthy. And, he sort of like disguised that for a little bit until it sort of became the norm. And then all of a sudden, all that little white dot, that black dot started coming back up again and going, hello, see me, you've still got to heal me. So it's like, we think our healing, we think that we numb our pain through alcohol, drugs, being with people, staying busy, like overproducing at work, overproductive, over exercise, there's so many ways we avoid our pain. And I was doing that through relationship, and it took the breakdown of that relationship to wake me up to that.
Wow, that whole part is so amazing, and thank you. And
you're welcome.
Like, congrats on being able to work through that. I'm assuming these days you don't have that happen as often, but you're super aware of it. Is it almost like a curse that you are so aware of it all?
So what happens now is, I still catch myself. Like, it's so interesting how we protect ourselves from intimacy. We the last guy I dated. What I'll say is this, right? Is I'm a big believer that, the universe is always playing out. God he always has a plan, right? I always grew up thinking, I really want to have a beautiful relationship. I want to create a family. Because I felt so lonely and broken in my home, I always wanted to create this family home of like safety and love and laughter and joy. I always have felt that from when I was a small child. But funnily enough, the woman I was even a year ago, 2 years ago, could not have created that relationship to have that because of the ways that I would sabotage it through my own fears. So I'm a big believer that I'm going through this pain, this work to become that person, right? Because the last guy I dated, and what I've seen is I've seen every man I've dated since I've been doing this work more and more become more emotionally like there.
So you're getting closer and closer.
Closer and closer.
Yeah.
And I even noticed it in the last relationship. For the most part, I would say I'm in my feminine and I am quite open and vulnerable and honest. But when I do still go into protect mode, and I remember making a comment towards him, I don't know what, it was something around the lines of like, if things don't work out, then X, Y, Z. And that was my little way of putting up a shield to protect myself. And so what happened was, in the past, I would have said something like that and left it, but that would have like gnawed away at the relationship for him. And so ironically, the very thing I don't want is the thing that I'm creating with my unresourceful habits, right? My sabotaging habits.
Yep.
So I then caught myself. That night I sit down, I always reflect, And I looked at that behavior and I was like, wow, that's actually, that I noticed in him that sort of like reaction of like, wow, that's a weird thing to say. And then I noticed some distance between us afterwards. So I made a point of repair. So I have to come back and I have to own that behavior. So I said to him, I said, hey, yesterday I made this comment, you know, I really regret that because I think I put some doubt between us. I was only doing that because I was scared, and I'm really sorry. I actually don't want us to, you know, I don't want us to talk about this not working out. I'm committed. I'm open. I'm in this. I'm just still working through some wounds and some fears. And that was just such a beautiful moment of connection for us to then come towards each other and sort of like build on that. So we have to own the little ways that we keep people at arm's length, or the way that we are sort of like protesting to see, will they show up? Do they love me? Do I matter to you? That actually really are pushing them away.
Oh, and it's so relevant for what actually happened today with my fiance and I.
Right.
We barely ever argue. Like, it's a beautiful relationship. I actually think arguing here and there is fine. Like, it's not like we just said, 100%. You're working things out, right?
Yep.
But today it was interesting because we were like, she's at home. She's a teacher, so she's got 2 weeks holidays. For me, I work from home.
Yeah.
A part of my wound over the many years is I was always been a big gamer, big introvert. I love being at home by myself. And then whenever I would hear someone coming home, like mum or dad or someone else that lived when I lived at home, I'd freak out because they were going to come home and tell me, what have you done today? Why are you so lazy?
Shame.
When I was deep in my depression. So now I still see those parts of me play out, especially when Christelle's home.
Yeah.
Because it might be a moment today where I'd worked from like 7 this morning until like 11:30. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go get some food, come home. And I like to just have a little scroll here and there, just chill out, just defuse.
Yep.
And we knew you were coming. So like, hey, let's clean up a little bit. The place is always tidy, but she's like, she loves it clean. And I was just bending over at the bench there, stretching my hammies as I always do and just having a little scroll. She was like, hey, can you help me clean up? Because Nerida's coming. And I got triggered. I was like, hey, just so you know, like, this is my lunchtime right now. Is it okay that I'm allowed to? And I got a little bit angry. I noticed it. I apologized. I said, look, I'm sorry, but this is what I didn't want to happen. I've mentioned this to you before. When you're home, this is my job. Like, there's going to be moments where my downtime is just doing nothing for a sec. I know we need to do this, and I was aware of needing to clean up and do the things, right? But I caught myself, because in the past, I would have left that stink for like 2 weeks.
Yes.
I would have let that little argument turn into something that it didn't have to be.
Yeah.
But within like 30 seconds, I was like, baby, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I apologize, but this is what came up. But I wanted to bring something out of her, because I know from her wounds, she doesn't like to speak her truth. So I was like, hey, is this what actually pissed you off, not this? Yeah. And she was like, damn it, you're right.
I love that.
So being able to not necessarily tell her what her issues are, but just say, hey, was it more so this, and this that made you feel this way? And we had this really cool little, sorry. And we had a little hug, little kiss. It was like, it was all good.
Yeah.
Right. So it's being so aware at that point. I was the same. Like, I went through dating. I had a partner for 6 years, then 4 years, had some like couple little smaller, and then I got to the point where I found the woman that meets those needs necessary, right? Because I'd done it myself.
Yes.
So it's really powerful for anyone listening. It's like, you can get to that point. I think a lot what I've seen in the past with some clients and friends even, they go, Trav, I just feel like I'm never going to find the right person. It's like you said, you're looking outside yourself. Yeah. Find yourself first. Yeah. And that's what, coming off the back of all that, what are some things you help women specifically do? Because I know you work with a lot of women in your business. Do you work with men as well?
I do. I work with men privately. Okay. But I run groups for women. I love working with men. And I work with a number of very successful men that really have struggled, like, suffering with low self-worth, communication issues in their relationship. So I actually really love working with men. And like, because I spent 10 years running the women's only gym, like, women I know in and out, right? Yep. I know them so well. And funnily, like, so much of my healing has come in working with men, because I've sat there and listened to men share their struggles with me. And it's been deeply healing for me, because, I would say I don't really understand men as well as I do women. And I really believe this is one of the things that we're struggling with in our relationships. We don't understand, we're often attracted to, like, think about it, right? You understand polarity. Like, sorry, what's your fiance's name?
Christelle.
Christelle. So you're attracted to Christelle probably because she, emulates beauty. She's like, what's the word? Like feminine.
The divine feminine is definitely the word that comes up for Christelle. Yeah.
She's petite.
Yep.
She's, we're even talking about, she takes a lot of care with the way.
Clean, yeah.
Yeah, like there are all these things about her that are so different to you, right?
Yep.
And the same for her. She's attracted to a big, strong man who's like strong and a leader and different from her. Like, will stand up and like speak out and set boundaries and, drive the relationship, like take her where she needs to go. So we're typically attracted to someone who's different from us. But then what happens is we actually protest to that difference. So, and what we don't understand is that the very thing that they bring to the relationship that we don't, when you put those two things together, that's what actually creates harmony. So for me, like my therapist used to always say to me, she'd say, if I had $1 for every time I heard her say this, she'd be like, not everyone's like you, Nerida. Not everyone thinks like you, Nerida. Not everyone.
Why not though?
I grew up so emotionally stunted that I just, I was so, I would say narcissistic to a point of, where I just could not see outside of myself. So it's been so healing working with men and just seeing the very different way that they think and speak and communicate and how it's just so fascinating. So
I love that because even in speaking in the polarity of you coaching with men, same thing for them. That it'd be so healing because I just worked with a mentor for 6 months and she's a millionaire, all the big things. She's a very strong, masculine woman, but she has that divine feminine too. So she's able to shift between the two. And that was really healing for me because I had a mum. I love mum. She's the most incredible woman, but very soft, very feminine, never really masculine, couldn't be direct, probably put on a fake smile a lot. So never really got the truth a lot of the time. So seeing the directness to me, I'm like, let's go. Because Christelle has that. She has that ability to be able to flow into that, which I think is really beautiful. But I love what you said there because I find I work with women really well. Same thing, because then they can see a representation of something they may not have perceived in the past.
Well, that's what's called a disconfirming experience.
Oh, I like that.
So when we're in those moments where we're being taken into an experience which is different to what we've had in the past, it's a disconfirming, because like you think about like the reticular activator system, right? We're just constantly looking for our environment to reinforce our beliefs. So when we have somebody mirror back to us a difference of experience, it's very healing. It's like, oh, this is possible. Like when you said you had an abandonment wound, say for instance, in your past relationships, every time you go into conflict, the woman would just up and leave because that's her way of coping, right? That's her way of finding safety. But for you, it's deeply triggering because it's abandoning. If you then can find a partner who can stay in that and work through it with you, it's like, wow, this is possible. This is actually bringing me some safety, and I'm now maturing because I'm being responded to in a different way.
Yeah.
So that's what you're talking about there, which is really what we're all seeking, right?
It's huge, and it's really cool because my experience with women's probably been much better than my experience with men, to be honest.
Yeah.
I've found a lot of I don't trust men still.
Yeah.
So. And I'm very aware of it, even though it's funny, right? I'm in men's work.
Of course, yeah.
So it's like our core wound is something that we then project into the world.
Your message every time.
So, but then having, conflicts with mates that I've gone into business with and being let down, I think I've always been projected on because I'm bigger than most people. It's literally, and like men, the insecurities, right? If someone's shorter than me, I literally cop the projection of, I don't like this guy unconsciously because he's bigger than me. Doesn't matter how nice I am to them.
Yeah.
And then they take the niceness as fakeness. So it's navigating that space, especially with what I do now, is like I genuinely just want to help people, but it's still seen as you're just in this for this, this, and this because you're this, this, and this. Do you ever get that feeling that what you're doing, you're literally healing the world as well, right? As one person at a time. Have you had to deal on your come up from where you've come from to now with those projections of people saying you're fake, you're this, you're that, or any sort of other bullshit like that?
Do you know what? I don't get it directly. I do. I mean, well, I'm starting to now, like that podcast I did with the unemployables. I had
that was great.
My first. Thank you. I have my first hate comment on there, and I was like, oh wow, I finally made it. Now that I'm getting hate comments, I get what I get a lot from people is people often tell me that, you know, they think I'm so authentic. And I think the reason is I share so much about my own pain on there, right? Like I share so much of my own struggles, so much of my own experience and how I'm still working through it. You know, I do know of people in the background who say things and you know, and the funny thing is, right, I now really understand. I don't take it personally because I see it for what it is. It's their own inadequacy, right? You know, I know I'm a powerful woman. I know that I don't hold back. And for women who struggle, the women I tend to trigger the most are those who struggle with the inadequacy wound, because you know, essentially we all have two parts to us, right? We have our light and we have our shadow. So the light, when you look at someone and you admire them, right, it's because they emulate a trait or a characteristic that you actually recognize within yourself. So much of what you've been saying to me is you admire so much of the stuff that I'm doing that essentially you're doing too, but you've owned it, right? You know that you have it within you. Now, the stuff that we see in people that we judge and that we reject are actually parts of ourselves that deep down we don't own within ourselves and that we wish we could overcome. So you think about it, right? I'm someone who's quite confident. I'm quite secure. I'm quite, I believe in myself. I do believe I have a purpose on the earth. If I come into contact with a woman who is struggling and not sure and deeply feel like wants to help, wants to change the world, but also feels so inadequate and so fearful of what other people think, me just shining my light is very triggering to that woman.
Yeah.
And so I do see a lot of that.
Yeah.
And I coach when, you know, those women that mostly sort of like arc up and project onto me, they end up working with me within 6 to 12 months because they're the very client that I need. So I would say the same thing to you, right? Anyone that's projecting onto you, you know, I had a psychologist, right? Maybe 18 months ago, this would have been. I put a post up about working with someone around their childhood trauma, and I had this woman jump on that I sort of loosely knew socially saying, oh, Nerida, I hope you're not working with people with childhood trauma without having a psychology background. That would be deeply harmful. And initially, like I always do two things, right? I sit with stuff and I ask myself, is there any truth in this?
Yeah.
You know, I'm very much like, is there something here for me to work on? And I was sort of like, you know what, maybe, you know, I don't have any desire to go and do a psychology degree because though that does not align with my core values, that method. But maybe there are some other courses and learnings that I could dive into. Then I ask myself, what might be going on for that person? So, you know, I was initially, because she's a very qualified psychologist, well known in Newcastle. So I sat with it, let myself process it. What am I feeling? What's coming up for me? There's a bit of fear. There's a bit of confusion. Why would she have written that? And then I just reached out to her. I sent her a DM and I was like, hey, love to chat to you about this comment that you made on my Instagram. You know, have you got time for a chat? She ignored me for 2 weeks, finally wrote back. And what was interesting was she was a psychologist that was working for a company, working her guts out, feeling very resentful, wanting to start her own business, but didn't have the confidence to. So I ended up saying to her, you need to work with me. You know, I can coach you to do this. Yes. So she worked with me for 6 months, launched her own practice, and now it's like thriving. So
shout out to her too, and
exactly.
to you, because it wasn't like fuck you. It was more of a hey, you could actually be changing the world with me if you go
That's
and do
right.
your own thing.
That's right.
And that's what we want.
I could see it for what it was.
Yeah.
And the only reason I can is because the only reason we get triggered by people is because we fear what they say might be true.
100%. Yeah, it's like our tormentor is our mentor.
I love that.
That's one thing I read was like whatever triggers you, it's your tormentor. So it's mentoring you on the path you're supposed to go down and heal. Yeah. Which is interesting you saying all this because the one recently for me, and I'm like a shadow work guy.
Yeah, yeah.
So I love going into anything that pisses me off. Like, there's something there, Trav.
Yeah, always.
And the one lately is anyone that's really extravagant. Anyone on socials that's real like over the top and it's like in your face.
Is that something you would like to be doing more of?
No, but I'm trying to figure out like maybe there's part of me that is more like but I don't feel that way.
Is it just that they're able to have that confidence without caring what people think of them? Do you focus?
As you ask that question, I think they're inauthentic. I think they're not actually like that and they're putting a show on.
So what part of you is not being authentic?
Yeah. So come back now. I don't think I'm actually saying what I want to say.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you. There you go.
You're welcome.
That's how quick it can be, right?
That's how quick it can be.
And I that felt true for me in my heart because I have definitely got more to say on topics that I'm avoiding because of kickback.
There you go. That's what it is.
Because I'm more outspoken now than I was,
Yeah.
but there's another level I need to go to.
You want to go to. So that's what you're rejecting in them, right? You're seeing them have the confidence to say whatever they want without caring what people think, and deep down you want to be doing that more, but you're holding yourself back.
In some way, definitely. That feels true for me.
Yeah.
So anyone listening, that's how quick you can actually shift some shit. You know?
I know, it's
Once
so
you start
good.
going into this work, especially shadow work, it's like those questions just bring it straight up.
Because people, they can't trigger it in you. Like, it's like speaking another language, right? If I was sitting here speaking Spanish and you'd never spoken or even heard Spanish before, you would not be able to relate, right? You would just be sitting here going, what? But if you've heard a little bit of Spanish, if you can sort of pick up on what I'm saying, but you can't really communicate it back, then all of a sudden we're starting to get somewhere, right? And then if you can actually speak Spanish, cool, we're on the same page. This is the same for these traits and characteristics and judgments that we have in other people. You would not even see it if it wasn't within you, because it's like a different language. It's like they're speaking Spanish, you kind of know Spanish, and that's why you're recognizing it.
I love that. I can almost see it for some people. It's when they become aware of it, it's like, blah, 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 yes, this is what is in you.
Yes.
Like, oh my God, this is what's pissing me off about this person.
It's always something about you.
And I've always said that I'm okay. I used to really struggle in the past because I wanted to people please everyone. When people were rejecting me and saying things, I'm like, oh, why don't you love me anymore? Now it's like, hey, I'm glad I piss you off because I know you're going to go get the help you need.
Yeah.
Especially men. If I've had a few men in the last month or so, I'm always meet them where they're at with compassion, because I know some men are in really hard places.
Yeah.
Also, though, if we continue to be like coddling to them, they're not going to fucking change.
Yeah.
So especially 2 weeks ago, I called a dude out and I said, look, man, I was giving him free coaching because someone won it and gifted it to him.
Oh.
So I was like, cool, I know what my worth is. I know what value I bring to this, but I'm still going to do this because I love this.
Yeah.
And I just said, look, man, all you have to do is respect my time. We booked the call, didn't show up, gave me some shit excuse 10 minutes after it was ready to go, and I just called him on it. I said, look, man, and I went off at him a little bit. I was like, look, I'm just not here to play around. If you're not willing to be called out on your shit and these bullshit excuses, do not move forward with this. Trust me. And he came back at me an hour later with like, oh, you're full of shit. You're not even ready for this. Why isn't this industry, regulated? That amount of money is ridiculous and blah, blah, blah. All the same shit I hear. And I just thought, awesome. He's probably going to go get the help he needs now, because he's going to think about that for many weeks, because most men haven't been called on their shit.
Yeah, yeah.
Most men have a daddy wound.
Yeah.
And they actually need dad to show up emotionally
Structure.
and actually call them out on their shit.
Totally.
So, and I love, it's probably similar for you, where when you come in and like give that really hard feedback on some of your male clients, which do you find that works quite well for them, or does it have to be more nurturing a lot of the time?
So I work with two, like whether they're male or female, I sort of incorporate two things. So I use accountability and I also use compassion. Now, accountability, it doesn't mean going into a shame spiral, right? So if I've got a client who typically presents with a lot of shame, the growth comes from the opposite of what you normally do. So, I may not use as much accountability because they may need a bit more compassion. Whereas if someone maybe has been just too easy on themselves, hasn't been using any accountability, isn't taking any responsibility, they probably need a bit more accountability. Yeah. So it doesn't really matter to me whether they're male or female. It's more about whether they're like the language that they're using. And we always know, I can always tell where someone's at as to how much shame and blame they're using. So if their shame is internal and blame is external. So, I'll always, there will never be a session go by where I won't point someone into what might be really actually happening for them. But it is a fine line to walk that I think we all struggle with, right? And I think that the more that we express our own, like when we share our own stories and our own places of, oh yeah, I've been here and this is what it felt like for me, it can really open the door. And this is why I think I don't agree with the psychology model, because I don't see a lot of them bringing their own experience into the room. I don't think they're able to.
Yeah. They're not allowed to,
They're not.
They?
It's not. It's part of, and I think this is where coaching and mentorship is so powerful, because I know for me, that was what changed my life. When I had a coach that finally started sharing, someone who I really admired and respected and looked up to was sharing all these parts of her life that weren't perfect, and that where she'd faltered made me sort of go, wow, okay, I'm not so alone. So it is a tricky line to walk, but accountability with compassion is where I like to sit. And I think if I just notice someone's projecting a lot and pointing outwards, it's definitely accountability that they need. Whereas if they're internalizing, taking too much responsibility, too much shame, there might be a bit more compassion.
Yeah, I love that. And I think one of the biggest things you said there is like the authenticity brings out so much help for people, because it's like, well, if I feel like this person's only one step ahead of me, it doesn't feel like it's such a big step.
Yeah.
You know, but if there's, and when I related to fitness in a reel I did the other week was, if you're trying to work with someone who's completely shredded and you're only just getting started, you probably feel like that's not attainable right now. Right?
Totally.
Whereas if you had a trainer that might be like kind of fit, kind of, you know, a little bit bigger, kind of like I am, but I know my shit, they probably feel more comfortable around that. So I feel like when I come from that space of, hey guys, yes, I've done a lot of work, I'm in a really good place, but I still have my shit.
Yeah.
It 100% makes people feel better.
Oh, you know what? I get asked, like I coach a lot of coaches and mentors and therapists, and, you know, they're constantly asking me for like, how do you get your message out? And it's like, I actually just spend a lot of time talking about my own bullshit, like my own pain, you know, like this happened last week and this happened yesterday and I noticed this and I noticed that. And then people are all of a sudden going, oh my God. And, you know, it's just so healing, right? Like there's think about it, right? Consciousness, like being able to actually see yourself is the hardest thing we will ever do. Ever do, right? Because just like a knife cannot cut itself, a fire can't burn itself. Like you can't see yourself, right? Like you're sitting here looking at me. I can't see me. I'm looking at you. You can't see you, right? You can see your arms and your legs, but you can't really see you. And the way that we do this is when we witness ourselves in others. So this is why group healing is so powerful, because again, those 3 wounds that we mostly suffer from, if you have a group of 15 people, a third of them are going to have the unloved wound, a third of them are going to have unworthy, a third are going to have unknown. So when you're sitting there and you're listening to someone else talk, there's probably at some point going to be someone that's going to be saying things that you're going to be like, wow, that resonates. Oh my God, that's how I feel. That's what's happening in my relationship. So then all of a sudden you get to witness really yourself through someone else. And I think we have the power to bring this in our mentorship and in our coaching, in our one-on-one, when we do it for ourselves. And then it just brings us, you know, I just think we have to recognize, like, even if we're not putting ourselves on a pedestal, which obviously we never should be, our clients may be. You know, I think that our clients tend to do that, right? Most of our clients are watching us, following us on social media for ages before they actually engage. And so when you recognize that sort of like, you know, the celebrity effect that you can have on someone, and you can just knock that out of the park by being really real and sharing your own bullshit, then all of a sudden you have relativity and connectivity, and then all of a sudden you're side by side.
I much prefer that. I heard, have you heard Krista Tier before?
No.
She's incredible. She's a coach down the Gold Coast.
Okay.
Really powerful woman. My mentor just started working with her, I think. And what she said a few weeks back was she met a fan, right? A chick that follows her on socials. And she said it was wild because she ran up to her in the Gold Coast there and said, oh my God, you're so nice, you're so lovely, you're so approachable, you're nothing like you are on socials. Now, this might have been a bad thing, originally, if she saw it as like, oh, am I being authentic? She took it as, no, like, Pete, this is who she really is. She's a loving, caring, beautiful human, but she's very direct on her socials. She's very like, hey, you need to be like this. She's not fluffy at all. She's very real. But again, she is also that person that was met in the street. It's like that authenticity played out nonstop. And I myself really pride myself on, if someone ran into me in the street, you're seeing the exact same and hearing the exact same and feeling the exact same Trav as is on this podcast right now. So I do swear. So I do talk about real shit. I do talk about my stuff. I do make a lot of jokes and take the piss out of things because I love having fun. So I think when people really start to step into that, it's a game changer, because how much fucking easier is it to show up as you, who you really are?
Well, authenticity is the highest emotion that you can ever express. It's higher than love, right? Shame is the lowest.
Like frequency-wise as well.
Yeah. Authenticity is the highest. So, you know, when we're acting like we're not, or when we're in our not self, so we're actually trying to be a certain way that we're not, it's actually exhausting, because what you're actually then playing out is the opposite of that, right? So it's very draining. So, you know, people always say to me, like, you're so authentic. How are you so authentic? Well, I don't think about being authentic. I literally like, if something's happening in my business, I literally, my content preparation is just three of my clients or four of my clients will sort of say the same thing over and over and over, and I'll be like, wow, I need to talk about that, and I go and talk about it, and I just completely detach from how it's received. And so and you know, I have my viewpoints and I have my beliefs and I'm always open to being challenged on it, but I just have my views that I really believe and I do back up, and I'm not afraid to put that out there. I'm not afraid if someone challenges it, because my ego is not attached to it, right? I'm always open to being wrong about something, but that's through a conversation, not a label or an assassination, right? So, you know, it's one of those things. I think it comes, like, I've had a few rings of fire, right? Like with the pandemic, I was very outspoken about how I didn't agree with the way that the government were going about things and the businesses. And, you know, I lost half of my business overnight because of certain decisions I made. But at the end of the day, you know, one of my core beliefs was community, right? One of my core values was community. So when the government said to us in New South Wales, you can't open your businesses to people who are not vaccinated, I decided not to do that because it didn't align with my value of community. Now, I lost half my business, but I can sleep at night knowing I didn't abandon myself.
You stuck to yourself.
Yeah. So many people criticized me, but it was hard. But I now look back and I think I'm so proud of myself because I stuck to my values even when the world was against me. Brene Brown talks about this, which is ironic because her views around this topic, you know, I find very interesting because she's all about the shame.
Was she for it, was she?
Well, she was, I think, but what the funny thing is, she's a shame researcher, right? Yeah. But I noticed a lot of her language around this time was projecting a lot of shame onto people that weren't buying into the agenda. And so that was really interesting. So that, for me, she was always someone I really, really looked up to, and I still do. I still respect her work, but there is a part of me that was really disappointed by that she could, you know, and she always used to say, you know, your core values, like, you have to be able to hold on to them even when the world is against you.
100%.
And I can honestly, hand on my heart, say that I did that. And it was a ring of fire. I lost everything. Like, I lost a lot. But now it's like, great, that's a gift because I don't care what comes at me now. I really don't care.
I couldn't resonate with that more. I lost so many people during that, like celebrities I looked up to.
Yeah.
Not necessarily pedestaling them, but it's just, I love what they're about. Like The Rock was one for me, right?
Yeah.
That dude pushes so much bullshit, it's not even funny. And like, people look at him like, oh, yeah, this is. He was against, he was trying to tell people to spend money during that Hawaii thing that happened in Maui when that big fires and everything came through, which I feel was a government thing anyway.
Oh, yeah, of course.
But he was trying to like say, and he's with Oprah there, who's also one of the fucking elite people that do all the bad shit too. Which is a whole nother topic.
Yeah. We could go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, but again, it's like that sort of stuff really pissed me off, and I'm the same where I actually left business recently myself that myself, it just wasn't aligning anymore for what I truly believe in. And that was a big thing for me to leave because it was something I helped build. Yeah. But I had to step away because, some of the things just weren't sitting right for me. So I agree. It's like when you look back and you said, I made that decision based off if it was integral with my self-worth and core values. Yeah. That means more to me than anything.
I agree.
Yeah. Now, we've already done an hour and 10 minutes somehow.
I told you I can talk.
No, I've really enjoyed this. I've just been like in the vortex. Yes. But I do want to make sure I do topics with the tech because
love it.
I really enjoy this because it's like straight up value for anyone to hear a question and go, holy shit. Yeah. Let's go up here and let's start with the first one. So, Nerida, knowing that you are a huge emotional intelligence coach, mainly within businesses, but is it outside of business as well?
Yeah, I do work with people. Like, I work with business owners typically.
Cool. Yep. Yeah. Yep. Epic. So, could you share how emotional intelligence has shaped your approach to business coaching?
Definitely. So, the funny thing is, I'm not a business coach. Like, I'm not a strategy coach. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, you could go out and figure out anything that you wanted to in your business. You can make anything happen. My job is to highlight to you the reasons why you're not already doing it. And it's because you're resisting feeling certain emotions.
Oh, let that land for anyone in business right now, because that's what I'm seeing too.
You're avoiding the feeling of rejection, inadequacy, failure, frustration. The list goes on. So when I teach you how to be more able to tolerate those emotions, you'll naturally take the actions you need to.
What would you do if someone was suffering with fear of failure?
I would explain to them, actually, you're not suffering from a fear of failure. You're suffering from a fear of rejection. You're suffering from a fear of feeling shame. You're avoiding that emotion of shame. So the more you learn how to tolerate shame in your body and be okay with feeling that way, the less you'll start to fear it.
Is a lot of your work somatic based?
Yes.
Yeah, I feel that. It's definitely noticing with especially my mindfulness aspect of bringing people into their body and to feel it with the breath work and meditations. Even with the hypno stuff that I've learned through NLP.
Amazing.
It's incredible for them to actually go to where is the emotion in your body?
Yeah.
What does it look like? What does it feel like?
Yeah.
Let's get it out of there.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah, it's massive.
What are some practical ways business owners can integrate wellness practices into their daily routines?
Yeah, so one of the first things I'd love for people to do more is just to practice emotional attunement. So literally just each day, there's a great thing on Pinterest called the emotion wheel. Go onto that, download the emotion wheel onto your phone and put it on your fridge. And each day just check in. What 3 to 5 emotions am I feeling today? And then you ask yourself, what emotions do I want to feel today? So if I'm feeling frustrated, if I'm feeling annoyed, if I'm feeling depleted, well, if I'm feeling frustrated, I probably want to feel calm. If I'm feeling annoyed, I probably want to feel joyful. If I'm feeling depleted, I want to feel energized. So it's like checking in with how you're actually feeling and then asking yourself, what do I actually want to feel? What actions can I take to get me from here to here? And so then all of a sudden you're starting to show up each day, showing up for yourself and wellness. Like I'm not one of those people that has like a routine, I love a morning routine and I love an evening routine, but mine looks different and I'm constantly checking in with what I need. Some days I need to get up and ice bath and get to the gym and move my body and meditate. And some other days I need to get up and have a hot shower and go and sit at a cafe and journal and have a cry. So for me, that's different every day. But every day I'm checking in and I'm asking myself, like, what do I need today?
Beautiful. Can you give an example of how a greater sense of connection within a team directly contributed to a business's success?
Number one thing that makes businesses thrive is something called psychological safety. And that is basically emotional safety. Everyone craves this everywhere they go. People want to feel valued. They want to be seen. They want to be accepted and they want to feel significant. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what you're doing. We all have that desire. So the more that you bring emotional intelligence into the workplace, the more you can identify when people aren't feeling that and you can jump in and intervene to create that, to prevent, unproductive behavior or losing staff.
Huge. What strategies do you recommend for leaders looking to build a more empathetic and understanding workplace culture?
Develop empathy for themselves. You can't have empathy for anyone else unless you've done the work for yourself. So I have an amazing emotional intelligence 101 program that you can buy. You can do in 6 weeks, pace it at your own pace. And it teaches you how to emotionally attune, how to regulate, how to create safety, how to create empathy, all those things that essentially the way we treat others is the same way we treat ourselves. So if you're noticing people around you are craving more empathy, then that's probably a guidepost to maybe you're not treating yourself with enough empathy.
In your experience, what emotional barriers are most common among business leaders and how can they overcome them?
Shame. Most business owners experience a lot of shame and really, particularly are working to avoid feeling that shame. So they've got those perfectionist tendencies or they seek validation. So I think that the more we can develop, self-compassion and a sense of high self-worth within, then we become naturally better leaders.
I love that. Do you feel like vulnerability plays a big role in achieving corporate success?
100%. I think that, I think a lot of leaders don't understand how much other people look up to them. And so when they only see that perfect side of you, that successful side of you, they're not really able to connect with you. If you're able to bring in a bit of vulnerability and you're able to bring in a bit of humanity into your workplace, people will see that side to you and it will make them feel more accepted because you're accepting that part of yourself and they will naturally want to show up for you and buy into the cause.
How can businesses effectively manage stress among their employees, particularly in like the high pressure environments like your corporate and that sort of thing?
I actually run a workshop on this. I definitely think the best thing businesses can do is to engage. What I recommend any business to do is to come up with a budget for the year to invest in their staff's emotional well-being. And whether that looks like bringing someone in to run workshops, like I work with a lot of businesses and I do 4 workshops a year and one of them is all around stress and burnout. Or if it's just we check in with each other and we do a monthly sort of check-in or, whatever that budget looks like, but really understanding how to do that. Now, What I would say is at the root of all overwhelm and burnout is another, again, it's avoidance of shame. It's people working to avoid themselves. Like one of the ways that we avoid our pain within is overworking and being burnt out, because anytime we sit still, all that stuff starts to come up. So addressing that and having those conversations with people and setting good boundaries, and just being mindful of valuing in people other things other than their productivity, letting people know how much you value them as a person in the workplace, and finding ways to connect with people so they feel really valued and really, appreciated, where it's not really all tied in what they produce.
What's your take on the balance between personal development and professional growth?
I think that they're one and the same. I think anything that brings you any sort of awareness and understanding is growth. And, I get a lot of people, because, I work with a lot of business owners that are worth, millions, and I'll work with them in their relationship, right? And I'll teach them communication skills. But then I'll notice they'll say, oh, well, this also happened at work. And then I'm like, cool, just take that and that whole framework that I just taught you, take it to work. And they're like, oh, I couldn't talk to staff like that, could I? And I'm like, this is the thing, right? We're creating a ripple effect every time we talk to anybody. Why would you not do that? There are people going to work every day that are thinking about committing suicide. There are people struggling with divorce, dying of cancer. Like, why would you not bring that compassion and humanity into the workplace? People are spending 40 to 50 hours a week in the workplace. Why would you not bring that in? So I don't think they're any different.
Why do you think they're not bringing it in? Do you feel like a lot of companies almost bring in like red flags around that, saying like, don't talk too much about this and this, or they don't know how to? I
think a lot of companies are investing in this, but they're putting it as such a professional development thing, when really at the end of the day, I used to get so confused about this when I started doing this work, because at the end of the day, it's all the same thing. Yeah. It's all a sense of, we all sometimes don't feel like we're enough. That's all it is. Whether you talk about anxiety, ADHD, depression, whether you talk about self-care, at the end of the day, every single human being on this planet struggles with that fear. And that's all it is. So I think that in a corporate sense, people just package it up differently and try to make it sound more structured and more fancy, because I feel like there can be a bit more of an ego and a bit more of that sense of it needs to look a certain way in that environment, when essentially it's just all the same stuff. It's just basically helping people to work on their own sense of self and the way they see themselves, and to develop, reconnect to that part of themselves, and so that they're emotionally more mature.
It's such a great point, because I think what happens is we try to separate us because if we work in corporate, we work in trades, work in the mines, we're football players, we try to say it's all different, right? We're all fucking human.
That's right. It's all just people. Same shit. That's right. It's all the same stuff. It's just that in the workplace, I think they try to, they do it with anything, right? They try to make it this big fancy thing, but at the end of the day, it's the same stuff.
Yeah, I love that. Do you work with startups at all?
I do, definitely.
So if you were to give some advice to a startup, how can you balance ambition with the well-being of their team?
I would focus on culture. I would focus on building a really strong team culture around 3 core values. Most startups, with my business, it really took off when I really understood. Because what happens, right, is when you're starting a startup, you'll notice that things will happen in the business that you like, and then things will happen that you don't like. The reason is that it all ties to your core values. But the more that you speak them and talk about them to your team, the more quickly people will understand, this is how we work in this space. So get really clear on that and focus on that, and then you'll either attract or repel the right people.
That's awesome, because even energetically, people will not want to work with you unless they align with your values, right?
100%.
That's cool. How can businesses build resilience against failures and setbacks?
By embracing them, by not fearing them. Failure, and I don't even believe in the word failure, right? Even businesses that go bankrupt, businesses that close, I don't think any of it's a failure, right? If you okay, I had a friend who ran a building business, and they went bankrupt, but then there was so much shame for them around that, right? They moved to a totally different city. And I look at it and I think, wow, you ran that business for 5 years. You created a brand that was recognized around town. You employed 15 people in that time. That's huge. You left a few debts. They raised over $150,000 for charity. Was that a failure just because they made some administrative, issues at the end? No, they learn a lot from it, right? So let go of that word of failure and just ask yourself, where is this taking me, right? What am I having to learn here? What divine storm is unfolding to take me to that next level? And mistakes, like sometimes the biggest mistakes have led you to somewhere you need to go. Like there's that story around the Chinese farmer. Have you heard of that Chinese farmer and his horse?
Yeah.
It's like you never know what's unfolding. Don't fear it. And if you do fear it and you create a story around it with your staff, what you'll notice is a lowering down of creativity and expression. Because if people fear, I'm going to get in trouble when I make a mistake, they will not show up and like go full out, right? They will they will not be authentic because they'll be trying to play within the lines. So just let go of that.
Let go is the overarching thing,
go.
right? Yeah. How can businesses actually better support the mental health of their employees? Is there some things that you implement into the businesses when you work with them? Like those daily routines or different things that they can ask them?
Do you know what? The best thing a business can do is make sure their leadership is living those values. So the first things I always work with businesses around is making sure that their leaders are doing the main sort of like fundamentals. So daily movement, daily exercise, getting sunshine, getting clean water, getting quality sleep, and eating well. If you don't have those things down pat, nothing else is going to work. So get those 5 things down pat. Then it becomes around, then we add in things like a reflective practice, whether that's meditation, whether it's journaling, whether it's just at the end of your day, taking a few minutes in the shower to take a few deep breaths and reflect on your day. Whatever, you've got to meet people where they're at, but just introducing this in general as a, and when you're as a leadership team sitting around and, if your team went out hiking on the weekend and, they would, going to barbecues and they were going to the beach instead of going out and getting blind and doing this and doing that, that's going to have a ripple effect around the rest of your team. So think about, your leadership team, like trying to encourage them to live healthy lives. And I think, once you get that down pat, the next steps, introducing a book club, there's so much information that's out there for free. Just bringing in, having a regular introduction of these topics and normalizing it is a really great way to boost emotional intelligence in the workplace.
I really like that. Is there some things that you've been struggling with lately you'd happily talk about?
I struggle with things all the time. One of the things I'm really working through, I'm 41. Like I said to you, there's a huge desire for me to get married and have a family. I'm really unpacking a lot of my wounding around, this fear of being alone and potentially not finding someone and not having children. So that's something I sort of battle with a lot. It's funny, years ago when I was younger, I didn't. I've always loved my life and lived a really amazing life, even though I've had my challenges. But it's now that I'm noticing I'm getting older, I'm noticing that is sort of it's hard to not let it overwhelm my life. So that's something that I sort of keeps me up at night a little bit. And I notice that the more I focus on how alone I am, the more alone I feel. So I have to really work hard to overcome my subconscious programming, right? When I'm dating, it's so interesting, right? I've got a lot of confidence in my ability in my career, but when it comes to dating, I'm the complete opposite. I go straight into fear. So if I'm dating a guy and he doesn't text me back or I don't hear from him, I don't go into confident thoughts like, oh, he's just probably busy, I'm sure I'll hear from him soon. I go into fear. I go into low worthiness. So that's something I really have to work hard at. And it's funny, that's the only reason that's not materializing in my life right now. I understand that. So I'm really doing a lot of work to shift the way I think and feel most of the time. I'm doing a lot of work with Joe Dispenza, his meditations and his books. Not him directly, obviously. I wish. One day. So that's probably I'm struggling with.
Thank you for being so open about that, because I had a really powerful conversation recently. Would have been a few months ago. I was at an op shop. I love op shopping,
me
right?
too.
And I rock up. They've got this sick little op shop with a cafe and Maroochydore here.
Oh,
and I'm sitting out the front, had a coffee, and the lady that served me, she had this really powerful aura about her. And I usually connect with people when I know I need to.
Yeah.
I know this conversation happened for a reason. And she was a really successful CEO from Sydney. She just does this to help out a bit, but she runs organizations around Australia and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just blown away. I think she's Polish.
Oh, wow.
Can't remember her name for the life of me, but she's run some big organizations. Anyway, this one thing she said to me really hit me. I actually got teary and I'm getting emotional thinking about it now, is that she talked about the invisible generation. Have you heard about that before?
No.
So women that turn 40 or 45 and then they feel invisible to the world.
Oh, yeah.
I think she was in her late 40s, very successful, quite an attractive woman too. And she just said, Trav, like there's moments where I don't feel like I exist. I walk around, I think about when I was younger and I'd get looked at and get spoken to by these men. And now there's these moments where I feel like, what's the point of me even being here? And I just thought about that for a moment and I thought, holy shit, the amount of women I would used to talk to when I worked at Rebel Sport, ladies that are so successful and doing all these things, they felt like days where anything they did to look pretty, to feel pretty, that they still felt like they were invisible in this world. Do you ever have days like that?
Do you know what? I'll share something with you, right? So there are 12 laws of the universe, okay? And one of them is law of cause and effect. Now, I will tell you, and one is law of assumption. So I will say that thought that she's going down is very dangerous because the more she follows that, the more she's going to find evidence to prove that to be true.
Yep.
Now, I'm telling you this, right? Like lately, I'm not even kidding you. Lately, a lot of the work I've been doing around, like, because, I don't need any more work in my business. Like, I don't need to work on my confidence and all that. So I'm really focusing more on, my intimate relationships. So, I'm not even kidding you, but like, I can sit at home and sit there and journal thought. Like, I might be really intentionally thinking, what do I want to create today? What do I want to feel today? And lately, words I've been leaning into are things like radiance and like radiant and glowing. I'm not even joking you. When I do that in the morning, I go out into the world and I get told by men, you're radiant today, you're glowing today. The other day I was in a bit of a funk and I'd been at home all morning working and I was just like, oh my God, you just need to go for a walk. You just need to go for a walk. And I was walking along and I was like, I was in a funk and I was like, all right, you need to change your state. And I'm wearing a Chicago Bulls t-shirt, baggy t-shirt.
That's
I'm
my
wearing
favorite
these.
team.
Yeah, thank you. I'm wearing these like little bike pants and I'm going for a walk and I've got a podcast on and I'm just like, I'm literally moving my body and I'm like, all right, get out of this funk. Like, come on. And then I'm like thinking thoughts and I'm just imagining myself like walking along and being radiant and just feeling good. And then all of a sudden I look up and I see these two guys carrying this big desk and this guy's just looking at me. And then he's just looking at me. So I'm sort of like, take my ears out. And then he says something about my shirt and he gives me a little wink. And I literally 5 minutes ago shifted my energy and then that happened.
Yeah, wow.
That happens constantly.
Yep.
So I will say if you're going out with the thoughts that you're invisible, you're going to find that everywhere you go. If you start changing your subconscious thoughts to, everywhere I go, men find me beautiful. Everywhere I go, men are drawn to me. Men are always looking at me. Men are always paying attention to me. People want to hear what I have to say. You're going to find that. So, I don't buy into those beliefs and those sort of like projections because they just allow people to reinforce something that is not true.
Yeah.
I know lots of women who are...
They try to sell like these like universal truths when it's like it doesn't have to be your reality, right?
And do you know what's funny? You connected with her. So what makes her, that's right there, evidence that truth is not true, that her belief is not true. Because here you are giving her attention, wanting to talk to her.
And that was my response.
How
I said,
is she not looking at that?
That seems weird because like I was really attracted to talk to you, right?
That's right.
Like I'm a engaged man.
Yeah.
So anyone listening, it's not like I'm like, I'm trying to talk to a lady. It's more like, and I'm very confident in myself with that.
Yeah.
I will have random conversations with random people.
Yeah.
When people look at that as a bit weird, it's like, aren't you married? Aren't you this? They're like, what the fuck? They're human beings. I'm going to have conversations with people, right? If they're interesting. Yeah. So, but it was really cool to just see that perspective and be like, wow, I've never thought about that because to think those realities exist.
I have heard of the older woman, like I'd not heard of that name, the invisible woman, but I have heard of like women talk about that.
Yeah.
And I push back on it constantly. I'm like,
I love
stop
that challenge.
telling. Yeah. Like if you wake up every morning and you tell yourself that you're beautiful and that people notice you and that people want to hear from you and that people adore you, when you go out into the world, you watch the magic unfold. It happens. I promise you. It
sometimes even comes from like what you wear. Like I've found that there's this lady I know, she's in her 60s and she's a grandma, she's all this, but she wears like bright orange earrings and stuff and these big block glasses. She's stylish, like swaggy as. And you can't help but look at her and be like, damn, purely because of the confidence in what she's wearing, right?
Exactly.
So I love that because anyone listening, and I'm sure you deal with this a lot with the work you do, right?
Constant.
Because confidence in the workplace, I'm assuming, is a big thing, not just personal as well.
And beliefs. Like a lot of the women I work with have this thing around men don't listen, like men are more valued in the workplace than women are. And it's like, oh, that's interesting, you know. And one of the things I find so ironic is when I talk to women who are feeling inadequate, feeling afraid to show up, to take up space, I ask them, what are you afraid of? I'm afraid I'll be judged. And I say, who are you afraid that you'll be judged by? Guess what? It's never other men, it's always women. And do you know what? In my career that's lasted 15 years, the people that have pushed me to start my business, to grow it, to go to the next level, to quit, to sell the business and go into something else, every single time it was a man. Every single time. It was always men that had the confidence in me before I had it. So, you know, I see a lot of women in the workplace really get hung up on that lie. And I worked in corporate before I worked for myself. I never saw that. You know, you'll never see a very successful entrepreneurial woman that works for herself ever talk about that glass ceiling. And people hate on me for that because at the end of the day, people fight to keep their limitations.
Yeah, because then
people will
they've got
fight
excuses,
to keep
right?
them. Exactly. And I don't live in that world. You can live in that world, go for it. Like, I'll see where you're at in another 5 years. Go for it. If you want to keep reinforcing that belief, you do you, baby. But I can see that my beliefs around me not being worthy of love are the thing that's held me back to the point where I'm 41 and I'm single and I'm scared that I will not have what I want in life. But I also recognize the more I focus on the fact that I'm alone and that maybe someone might not love me because I'm not lovable and why is it so hard for me, the more that I create that. So it's up to me to discipline my thoughts every single morning and every single night to change it up to be more conducive to the story I want to see. Because your mind is literally a movie that's in advance to your reality. It literally is. Everything that's happened in real life was once formed in imagination. And do you know what was so interesting? When I sat down and started doing this work, I realized that when I started La Somme, my women's only gym, it was so funny. I had zero money. My bank account was in the minus. I had no qualifications. I had no idea how to start a business. But yet I could not stop thinking about it. I was so excited. I would sit there. I'd write on a piece of paper, this is the way the gym's going to look. This is how it's going to be. This is the timetable. Like, I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I just made it happen. But do you know what's really funny? My whole life I've wanted to get married and have kids. How much time do you think I've spent imagining myself being proposed to and having babies? Hardly any. And when I went to start making myself do this, I felt these blocks and I was like, wow, this is so interesting. Like when you started, you know, before you actually did your very first podcast, how much time did you spend thinking about it?
The idea popped up when my mate said, I love the way you try to rewind my mind. You're like a technician. The image came to my head that same week.
Yeah.
I went on Fiverr, got some dude from Argentina to make it.
Yeah.
On an A1 piece of paper on my wall for 7 months.
That's right.
Before it became a thing.
Exactly.
But I couldn't stop thinking about it.
Exactly. So you imagined it, right?
Yeah.
When you were with Christelle, like you would have been thinking about asking her to marry you. You would have been imagining what might it be like to be married to this woman? What might our life be like to have children together? Whether you do that or not, I don't know. But
yeah,
it's
undecided.
Like, yeah, but it's like we all imagine the stuff before it happens. Yep. But the same goes for the negative. Yeah. Right. So I've spent so much time focusing on myself being alone that guess what? I am alone. So it's my responsibility, no one else's, to change that. So every night I have a routine in the morning and the evening. I bookend my day to allow myself to daydream and force myself to imagine, okay, what do I want a man to say to me? Oh, I want a man to tell me that I'm beautiful, that he loves me, that I'm the only woman that there is for him, that he thinks I'm so amazing. And do you know what's really funny? I've been doing this for about 12 months and I've literally heard men reflect back the exact things I've imagined them saying to me. Oh, man. This shit is so powerful. Like, you have no idea. To the amount that we create in our lives is crazy. Do you know, when I first started doing this work, I remember like when I went through this breakdown with my ex, I was so heartbroken and I had no money to pay for a psychologist. I remember going onto Google and I Googled, what do men look for in a wife? Like what is it that men look for in marriage? And I used to think it was beautiful, great figure, whatever. And it wasn't. The one thing that kept popping up, ironically, was emotional connection. Yeah. When I read that, I was like, I don't even understand what that means. What does that even mean? Hence me going on this whole thing of becoming this emotional intelligence coach. And then, you know, the next man that I fell in love with, who I still am in love with, he said to me these exact words. He was like, Nerida, I feel so emotionally connected to you. Like, who says that?
It's very specific wording.
Exactly.
Very specific wording. So how long ago did that finish up, that one?
That was 2 years ago.
Okay.
And we've, it's weird. He's someone that it's a weird, I don't know, there's something spiritually that's going on there. I think we're still connected. There's so many things that have happened between us that are unexplainable. Like
twin flame kind of vibe.
Oh, but crazy, but without the sort of drama and the toxicity. I've really found myself like leaning into God since that relationship, and he was a Christian, and it's really interesting. I don't know what it is, but what I've done is I've let go of the need to know and the control, and I trust that I say to myself, Nerida, you have not done all this work on yourself just to end up alone. Like, you are meant to be with someone. You are meant to be in a relationship. You're not broken. You're worthy of love just like anyone else is on this planet. And it will come. It's just you're in the middle and I'm in the unfolding, and I just have to trust and let go of that control and fear.
I'm excited for you because I know it's coming. I can feel that. I feel like I'm the complete opposite with you in the way of I'm in the middle of my business stuff.
Yes.
It's this very like uncomfortable next level. Everything's just
excited for you
quiet
then.
right now. You understand it. You know it's there. And do you feel now? The crazy thing is, right? And I know everything happens for a reason. For me, that's my belief. You talking about God right now? How recently did you get into it?
Very recent, like 12 months. It's crazy. The world's waking up.
I can't escape it. Yeah, I can't escape it. And I've had people saying to me, my last podcast was with another mate, the other podcast I was talking about, Ryan.
Yeah.
He only just has started going to church and stuff because
me too.
He was reciting Bible verses without realizing it. So he'd be in the car and he'd have this quote download in and go, what the fuck? And then he'd read, and he started reading the Bible. He's like, oh my God, I've just worded, like word for word almost, a phrase from the Bible. And it's hard for him because we talked about it last on the podcast, and I said, it's hard because even myself in the past, I've looked at people and gone, oh, they're just crazy religious people. What the hell?
Yeah.
But
that's
I know
conditioning. That's brainwashing.
Exactly right. Because now I see it. It's so beautiful, and it's so understanding and open to everything and everyone. Yeah.
Well, the Bible's just literally a book of values and manifestations.
It's like the best personal development book ever.
100%. And the reason why we've seen all this conditioning around, religion being so bad is because the agenda, like, it's all about taking us away from our true selves. Like, when we actually understand how powerful we are, when we actually understand how powerful every single thought, every single emotion is, we would be so much more careful with what we speak and what we think and what we do. And so I've only really and so funnily, that relationship, right, with Justin, I remember sitting there. I wasn't even that attracted to him when I first met him. Like, I was sort of like, oh, he's a nice guy, but I wasn't really that into him. And I remember, but he just was super consistent, super lovely, kept making me laugh. And I remember this one day, like, I'd never had a connection with God ever. I knew he was Christian. I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of weird, but whatever. And I remember like 3 months into meeting him, and I remember very clearly sitting there watching him. I was sitting looking at him, and he was looking out the window. I lived in this apartment, and he was telling me a joke, and he was looking outside laughing, like he was telling me something. And I had this, it scared me at the time, but this powerful like voice come through that said, it's you. And I was like, oh my God. And I just remember this moment of like, what was that? And then I remember like, wow, that's so interesting that I just didn't even know it at the time. I didn't even know till years later when I was talking to a friend and I told her about what had happened, and she said, that's God. And so many strange synchronistic things. Like, we broke up, and then a year later we met back up, and, it was funny. We used to go down to the ocean baths a lot. And I remember going down there when we were like, I was quite heartbroken, and I remember looking at the bars and wondering like, oh, I wonder if he ever comes down here wondering if he would bump into me. At the time, I lived in this apartment block that was right on this main road, and I used to sit on the balcony. We used to always sit on the balcony and eat seafood, and I would think to myself, I wonder if he ever pulls up at that set of lights and looks up and wonders how I am. All these things, right? And then when we caught up again a year later, and he literally said to me, Naz, I've been coming down to the bars, like hoping to run into you. He said, when I pull up at that set of lights out the front of your house, I always look up and wonder how you are. So he'd literally been reflecting back all these things that I was just, it's crazy, right? I'll tell you this other thing. I've never spoken about this, by the way. I don't think he'll hear your podcast. But I remember it was his birthday, and it was the year after we'd broken up, and it was 2 years after we'd broken up. Normally I would message him, But we'd caught up and then we'd not spoken. So I thought, you know what? I'm not going to message him, but I'm going to pray. I'm going to pray for him. Like, I was like, why am I needing to message him? That's for me. It's not really for him.
Yeah.
It's his birthday. Does he really want to hear from me? Probably not. It's probably going to land for him feeling guilty, feeling sad that he's upset me. So I can just pray and send him this love. So it's the evening and I'm going to bed and I'm like, okay, I'll pray for him. It's been his birthday. I hope he's had a beautiful day. So I sit there, I do this beautiful meditation, put my hand on my heart and I'm like praying for him and I'm like, I hope he's had a beautiful day. I hope he's had people who've been with him that he loves and I hope he's felt loved today. Da, 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 da. And then I go onto Instagram and then I'm like, oh, we weren't connected on social media. And I thought every now and then he would look at my stories and I had this feeling of like, oh, I wonder if he's noticed I haven't messaged him today. I wonder if he's looked at my stories. And I had this like want to go and look. And then I was like, no, don't. You don't need to. Stop. So I start looking at my feed, right? I just every now and then, do you ever do this thing where you go through your feed and you just look at your grid to check out and see if it's,
Yeah.
What do
I look like at the moment? Yeah.
I literally, kid you not, I was going through these photos and I found this photo of me and a friend like a month prior, like not even my most recent photo. And I'm looking at this photo and I'm like, oh my God, I love this photo of us. Like we both look so happy and I'm really tanned and I look really fit. And I'm just like, oh, I just love this photo of us. We just look so happy and content. And it was at the gym. And then I looked at the time and it was 10 o'clock and I was like, oh my God, go to bed. I looked at that photo for like a few minutes, right? I was fully loving on myself in that photo. And then I was like, oh my God, it's 10 o'clock, go to bed, turn my phone off, go to sleep, go to the gym in the morning. I come home, I'm having breakfast, and then I pick up my phone and I go through Instagram. And all of a sudden I see Justin liked your photo at 10:01. And it was the exact photo. I literally threw my phone. I was like, oh, it was the exact photo. It wasn't my most it was like a month prior. Yeah. There was like 14 photos. You can't tell me God doesn't exist. When I'm sitting there praying for him and at the same time we are looking at the same photo, I'm sorry, I'm a different person after all this. Like
I fully believe that. Yeah.
Before this, I used to doubt it and God has just shown up in my life so many ways since then. Do you know what? It was funny. I didn't even know this, but like you said about your friend talking scriptures, one of my I love to take photos, write little quotes and then put music to them. And I had a friend reach out and say to me on Instagram recently, she was like, Nez, are you religious? Are you Christian? And I was like, no, not really. Why? She was like, you've been posting gospel music to all of your photos for the last like 3 months. And I was like, I didn't even realize that, but I was just resonating with it. And I was even listening to it at home and I just didn't even realize that's what it was.
Yeah, wow. And every part of me is just lit up right now because something in me is going, finally, we're starting to realize and hear. And I've realized now part of me isn't speaking up.
Yeah.
Is about this stuff. Because I've had some crazy shit happen this year.
Wow. Again, do you want to share any of it?
Look, I will share this part because it's very recent and you might know it. Have you heard of the 144?
No.
So, oh man. Yeah, there's a lot of uncomfortable feelings coming up speaking into this because it's so real for me and it's so real for the person that told me and the person that was there to listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I had this beautiful person reach out. Her name's Hadil. She was on MKR years ago.
Mm-hmm.
She was very controversial then with her sister or a friend or whatever. Everyone hated her.
Mm.
Now, she's awesome. When I met her, she reached out. She'd just given my friend Christy a reading the night before and she told her everything. Like, this is this, and she was channeling like the Arcturians or something like that. I'm just understanding, aliens and ETs and what we're truly connected to. And she was spot on. And Christy, no one can connect to Christy. She's so powerful spiritually that no one can do readings on her. This woman could straight away. So Christy told me about this, and then the next day, I'm talking about it and she reaches out. She's like, hey Trav, if you're ever open, I'd love to give you a reading. I'm like, okay, all right, I'm going to have to be open. This is only last week. So she reaches out, we get on a call that night and Christy and I just finished our group program and I was like, hey, can you stay on and with me and listen to what this lady has to say? Dude. She goes ahead to say, so she's like, okay, Trav, and she's totally normal. For anyone listening, it's like a normal person you chat to in the street, like vibey as, really lovely. And she even said, I still don't know how this shit works, Trav. I've just been activated. Yep, I've just been activated in the last like month. And I've been scared to speak up because I know how weird people think this is.
Yeah.
I even feel weird still talking about it, but I know it's so true, so I need to say it. And she goes, so us three are like Dominion 144 Archangels or something like that. We're part of the Arcturian tribe. We are here to change the world. We're here to heal the world, close up portals, all this stuff. And I was tearing up. I didn't even know what the hell she was talking about, but I knew it was true.
Yeah.
And she said, okay, Trav, are you ready for me to do a reading? So I've recorded this on Zoom. And she nailed it. She's like, so what they're telling me is that they've been trying to communicate with you, but your root chakra is almost completely closed off, so you need to do Qigong to activate it. You need to heal those parts of you. You're still holding on to something that happened to you when you're a kid that you're not letting go of. It's not letting yourself fully love yourself authentically because you're not letting go of it. Just saying all these things that was bringing up so much emotion for me, and I was heating up. I was goosebumps, crying, and I'm just sitting there listening to these things. I've just met this woman, but she nailed it, every single spot on thing. And to me, I'm like, okay, well, I can't deny that. There's no part of me that can sit here and go, that's bullshit. She just, whatever. Yeah. And then she's saying things about, God and the Bible, and that I need to really start diving into that, because the reason I know now, in the past 3 months, I've had about 5 or 6 people say the exact same thing. Randomly reach out and go, hey, Trav, I know you're not religious, blah, 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 but I've had someone tell me to tell you that you're part of like Archangel Metatron's crew, and you need to help, bring people to the light age and all these things. And again, I say these words and I still don't understand them fully myself, but something in me does.
Yeah. And that's what you got to trust.
Yeah, like even the biggest one that hit me was a guy at one of our workshops. He was a Reiki master. He come up to me when we did the eye gaze. Yeah, and it's like we get all the men to look us in the eyes for like a solid minute or so. And he said something, and he said, okay, can you just trust me? And he like did something with his fingers and was holding my hands, and my whole body just like boom. It was like this activation. My whole body got goosebumps, and he got goosebumps, was crying. He come up to me after it and he's like, bro, I got to tell you something. I know this is going to sound strange, but he pulls his sleeve up and he's got a picture of Jesus on the cross. He said, this is you. You're part of this crew. And he started crying, got goosebumps. I got goosebumps. And again, for anyone listening, I know how wild this sounds and I feel weird saying it, but it's just my reality. It's been so true for me.
Well, isn't it funny, right? Did you feel this same sort of fear when you first started doing this sort of work with men? Like maybe not to this level,
yes.
But
yeah, there was this something that was like lighting up in me at the start.
Right. So the only reason, like this, I find this so interesting, right? Like with all this channel work, activation work, like the work that I do, right? Like there's a reason why I'm so fascinated by emotional intelligence. And there's a reason why someone else is fascinated by attachment styles, and someone else is like, everyone's got something, right? This is just what speaks to me and what resonates. So this is like a channel for me, right? It's something that comes through that I don't even really know.
Agreed.
But I don't judge it too much, because in the 3D, like it's sort of like people understand it, right? Now, you're sort of the same with the work that you do for men. But now what's happening is you're now going to a level that the majority of people would not understand. But why are you making that any different to the men's work that you do? At the end of the day, it's all the same stuff, right? It's all lifting consciousness and humanity. And the thing is, like, if you want to be a leader, that means sometimes going first, even when you're ridiculed. Look at Jesus. Like, we just celebrated Easter. Like, he died on the cross for us. So it's like, I just feel like life is so short. If I can say anything to implore you, like, let go of anything that you fear anyone might be thinking of you, because the more you focus on that, the more you're going to hold yourself back. And the funny thing is, people don't think about you anywhere near as much as you think that they do.
Yeah, agreed.
Most people are like, numbing themselves with like most of the people that are going to judge you, you don't want to be like anyway. So the people, like anyone that's criticizing you is always doing less than you, always. Because anyone that's doing more than you doesn't have time to criticize you. They're doing their stuff. And if anything, the people I look at that are really, really like amazing, that I aspire to be like, they're pulling people up. They're like, come on, you can do this too. They're not pushing them down. So just like, there's obviously something happening to you, for you. Like lean into it and trust the way it feels. Feeling is the new language of like where we're heading, right?
It feels so right. It does feel
right.
right.
Well, that's what you've got to trust.
I'm definitely not pulling back. It's like just leaning in. And one thing Cody said, Cody McAuliffe, amazing coach, I went to his event a few weeks back. And I know this is all happening now.
Yeah, for a reason. Do you know why?
Yeah.
They talk about April. But do you know why it's probably really happening too? Because you're starting to create enough safety. You're starting to step into, like, when did you get engaged? Probably recently?
So a year ago now.
Yeah. So it's like you're now creating a lot more safety, stability, so you can go to that next level.
Yeah, that feels good because I think the biggest thing that really activated recently was we ran an event and a lady walked in and she's very connected and we just met. You know how this stuff works.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And she's like, I feel like I actually have the gifts to show people what modality they're going to create in this world to change the world.
Yeah.
And she said, what I see in for you, and she was just walking through the door to come in. She's like, what I see with you, because I said, when she said it, something in me goes, yeah, something happened recently where I feel like I created something called shadow spirituality, where I asked shadow questions to the higher self. And it was wild when I did it. It was like a channeling. The woman that I did it for was speaking like a different language and saying some really powerful shit. And she said, yeah, what's coming through for me is I see you with like a scepter that's spreading out light through the darkness.
Wow.
And that hit me and I thought, okay,
that's cool.
Maybe it's part of this. This is definitely my big thing.
Yeah, but you don't need to figure it out.
No,
you just trust.
Yep. You just keep going.
There's a great quote, go to where it's warm, the people, the places and the experiences that feel good. So when you let go of like, what will people think, or the fear, right? And you lean to love, like, okay, well, does this feel right? Does this feel good? Does this excite me? That's where you need to lean into and just like, yeah, you don't need to have it figured out. Like that dreams in concrete, plans in sand. When you, the dream is cool. I want to help people. The way that it gets there might look different. Yep. It might be a podcast for a little while. That might transition into something completely different and wild. That's okay. Just when you go into control and having to, and I'm talking to myself right now because I know I do this too, right? It's so hard when the more fear we have, the harder it is to let go. But just it will unfold. If you just keep leaning into the people and the places that feel good, it'll unfold naturally. Yeah,
I like that. And it's on the other side of the thing that Cody said was go toward the fraud.
Yes.
It's like that stuff that you feel like you're not meant to do or you're 100%. Not worthy of.
Yeah.
And I've noticed myself doom scrolling lately because of it too. Yeah.
Those people that are judging you too, they just don't get it because they just don't even get the basic stuff, and that's okay. They're not there yet. Like, that's fine. But if you live your life for those people, like, oh, how exhausting, how draining. You're not like that. Like, and I just feel like life is so short. Say the weird stuff, do the weird stuff, like, because the people that need it will get it.
The worst part is, well, probably the best part is that during this thing that you just brought up then is do the weird stuff, be the weird stuff. Cody said the one thing that makes most people he coaches to be successful is they embrace their weirdness
100%.
fully. Because they bring in the other weirdos.
That's right.
Weirdos, right? Yeah. Look at the etymology of that word.
Yeah.
And that is when their success truly goes to another
100%.
level.
100%. Because it's authenticity. You have no choice but go to that next level when you're truly being authentic.
Well, coming back to the projection that I was bringing before, I think that's part of it too.
Yeah,
I've been seeing some people that have truly embraced their weirdness.
100%. And you want to too, but you're holding yourself back.
I think I have, but there's another level.
Yeah, you're deep down going, I wish I could do that, but you're not owning it. That's why you're criticizing and rejecting them for it. Yep. When you own that desire and you're like, oh wow, I actually want to be more like that, then all of a sudden that goes from your shadow to your light, and then all of a sudden you collapse time and you become more like that more quickly, and that's where your success is.
Yeah, wow. Oof.
And you'll know it by testing it, right?
Yep.
You'll literally see it. Like, and it's a blend, right? Like sometimes I've done things that have felt really good to me, but yet I've been demonized and criticized, but the payoff has come much later. You know, it's like at the end of the day, Naval Ravikant says it's like at the end of the day, you can't escape yourself. Like at the end of the day, you'll lay on your deathbed and you'll look back on everything that you've achieved or everything that you've done, every act you've taken, every word you've spoken, and you have to reckon with that. You have to ask yourself, like, and have you ever read that book, 5 Regrets of the Dying?
No.
The number one 5 regrets of the dying is I wished I'd lived a life more true to myself.
Yep.
And that breaks my heart. Like so many people living life on other people's terms, and then they get to their deathbed, palliative care, and they look back and they go, fuck, why didn't I do that differently? Don't be that person.
I think I feel actually what you've brought up today is, and there's always new levels, right? New levels, same devil. Yeah. What's come up for me is there's this still part of me, this little boy version that
wants to be accepted.
Yeah, because he hasn't gotten past the football culture yet.
Yeah,
we used to get picked on heaps in football. Any boys that were different, you would just get ragged on by the whole team.
That makes so much sense. We'll go into that feeling, right? Do you meditate? Do you have a meditation practice? What I would do is I'd go into a meditation practice and I would sit and I would like bring up all that fear, right? Bring up that like a moment of you being fearful of like stepping out of the crowd, and like I would play out that, or even play that out in adulthood. Like imagine yourself standing on a stage and everyone booing you and everyone laughing at you, everyone writing things on your Instagram or your YouTube. Actually bring that to vision and grieve that. Let your body process it. Like let your body shake, cry, scream, rage, whatever it is. Like let yourself feel that feeling fully, and do that over and over and over and over and over while you take the action as well to step into it. And then that's how you close that loop.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I will do that, and I'll let you know how it goes.
I'm excited to see where you take it.
I'll keep that documented, because I always will go to where I need to go to then not expect my clients to do the same.
100%.
You know, these coaches that are going around doing things and like, you got to do this. It's like, have you done it? No. Fuck that. So holy crap. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Oh, I'm so glad.
I feel like I could go for another 6 hours.
I know.
But we should probably wrap it up now. Yeah. Is there anything that you've got coming up that you'd like people to know about? Is there any words of advice you'd like to leave the listener with?
You know, obviously I'm a big fan of emotional intelligence. I offer a few freebies on my Instagram, as well as an online course, which I feel like the online course is such a great starter for anyone that's sort of like wanting to work on their relationship, work on their sense of self at work or in their business, like work on their parenting. It covers everything. That's Emotional Intelligence 101. And just to say this to people, like I've been doing this deep work for like 4 years, and I still notice myself showing up in ways that, you know, are just habitual. So it doesn't really matter how much emotional intelligence you've got. There's always so much more you could have, and lean into it, because it literally is the path to your success in your relationship, in your business, in your friendships. Like, it's your ability to take better care of yourself and to live a life more true to you. So however that looks to you, but just take that step to get to know yourself on a deeper level.
Amazing. And where can people find you on socials?
Yeah, please connect with me. I'm mostly active on Instagram, so at Nerida Bint. Send me a message if this resonates. I love hearing from people. I reply back to all of my messages. Facebook as well. I'm working on my website. That's not fully finished yet, but that is in the process. So yeah, I hope people resonate with this conversation.
Oh, there's going to be a lot of shares from this. And
good.
Just on that, guys, like, thank you so much for coming. And
thank you for
I really
having me.
appreciate this. For anyone listening, as I've said before, we need to do this as a group. You know, community is everything, culture is everything, as Nerida pointed out, and we can't do this by ourselves. You know, the sharing, the letting us know how it all went, rating the show, sending it to your friends and family, whatever it might be to help do us the change in the world that we want to. This is how you get a part of it. If you're going to talk about it, be about it. So be a part of the change, do the things that are necessary, and thank you for listening.
Oh, my ears.